In the following, we are going to present you the topic number 11, Climate and Topography. The structure is the following. First, we will introduce you to climate and topography in the context of urban planning in general. And then we will present you examples of vernacular architecture. The most prevailing influence of the situation and the surrounding of a town is the climate. Of course, this influence of climate is not so much reflected by the town directly, but it is essentially for the human, who as an individual or in a community builds houses or towns, either in adapting himself to the natural surroundings or in defending himself against them. The climate influences the human by heat and cold, wind and air, by rain, moisture and fog, by drought and want of water, by the changing seasons or by an unchanging uniformity, by its flora and fauna, by its diseases and many other things. With the architecture, the human adapts himself to the special climate situations. In the world, there are 31 different types of climate according to the Köppen-Geiger climate classification, divided into 5 main climate groups: their seasonal, precipitation type, and their level of heat. The Group A climates are the equatorial, or in other words, tropical climates, including rainforest climate, monsoon climate, tropical wet and dry or savanna climate. Type B are the dry, arid or semi-arid climates. These are desert climates, either hot or cold, and hot or cold semi-arid climates. Group C represents the warm temperate climates, which are very versatile from a temperate rainy or oceanic climate to subpolar oceanic climate or the hot summer Mediterranean climate. Group D are the continental or snow climates. They vary from hot summer but snowy winter to extremely cold subarctic climate with even cold summers. The Group E climates are the polar and alpine climates, either tundra climate or ice cap climate. To bring these very complex climates into context with urban settlement, we have simplified the climate zones to 6 zones, where human settlement is possible: the tropical zone, the subtropical zone, the temperate zone, the dry zone, the monsoon zone, and the subarctic zone. The table shows the needed shelter through the architecture in the different climate zones in 3 gradations. According to the table, the tropical zone implies necessity for shelter against rain, moisture, heat and sun. What the houses need are good airing and cooling, for example in Manila on the Philippines. The subtropical zone needs shelter against too much sun and cooling. An example is the climate around the Mediterranean Sea, here in Santorini in Greece. The temperate zone needs shelter against rain and snow, and alternatively shelter against cold and against heat, depending on the season. The houses should be oriented to the sun. This climate is familiar here for us in Weimar. In the dry zone, there should be shelter against sand, dust and drought. In most cases, also against too much sun or heat, as you could see it here in Beni Isguen in Algeria. The monsoon zone, for example, in Jakarta in Indonesia, mostly needs shelter against rain and humidity. The subarctic zone needs shelter against cold and wind, and has a want of sun and heat, as you could see it here in Helsinki, in Finland in wintertime. How to implement these shelters, needs and wants in urban design and architecture in the different climate zones, we will show you later on examples. We would shortly like to introduce to you the special features of the urban climate. The term urban climate is defined by the World Meteorological Organization as a local climate that has been changed by the urban development. The urban heat island is a typical feature of the urban climate. It is characterized by the difference in air temperature between the hotter city and its cooler surrounding countryside, and reaches its maximum during nighttime under cloudless and calm weather conditions. Urban heat islands have a number of different impacts. In the summer months, urban dwellers are at a greater risk of heat stress. This applies in particular to older people, people with previous illnesses, and small children, who are often unable to adapt sufficiently to greater heat, especially during heat waves. The higher temperatures in cities lead to a greater use of cooling and air conditioning systems, and thus to a greater consumption of energy and higher costs. Another aspect we would like to mention is the urban identity, those identification characteristics that make a place unique and recognizable. Beside architecture and the inhabitants of the city, those characteristics are mainly climate and topography. The cold or heat, if it snows or rains, or is even windy, is significant for a place and an important part of the identity. Moreover, the topography, for example with hills or a location next to the ocean, forms a place. This underlines the importance of the climate and topography in the context of urban settlement. To continue with topography, we first want to show you those two pictures of two streets. The main difference is in the topography. The one street is steep and leads to the water. The other street is flat and has mountains in the background. In most cases, the city must adapt to the topography. In some cases, it is possible to change the given topography. But anyway, the topography must be considered in urban planning. The land relief influences how a settlement is established, from its foundation, from the first paths and streets, to the way land is subdivided into a number of different parts, to the various buildings that are built in these plots, and even to the materials that will give expression and surface to all these forms. The structuring lines of a territory are the ridge lines and the lines of talwigs, linking the lowest elevation points. In different human settlements, the first paths follow this natural structure of the territory, and the crossings of those lines become first settlements. The city of Machu Picchu, built in the 15th century by the Inca civilization in the Andes, at almost 2,500 meters above sea level, is one of the most remarkable examples of integration between human settlement and natural support. Saint-Michel is a small settlement in the Normandy, France, developed around a Benedictine abbey, in Gothic style, built between the 11th and the 16th century. The uniqueness of this settlement is due not only to the dialogue with the land relief, as in the previous cases, but also with water. As in the previous cases, we cannot imagine Varanasi or Venice without their relation to water. Indeed, the Italian city, founded in the 5th century, constituted by 120 small islands and a wide set of channels, is a singular case of relationship between human occupation and lagoon where it is settled. Also very intense is the relationship between the city of Varanasi and the Ganges River. While the urban forms of this Indian city seem to touch the river, the life of its inhabitants is inseparable from the Ganges, using it in numerous actions including bath, laundry and funeral services. City locations in the context of topography could be categorized by the limitations for the settlement. When the location is unlimited, the city could spread to all sides. This is the case in a plain, in the water, or on a hillside. A limitation in one direction could be possible in 3 different ways. As one obstacle that could be surrounded, like a hill, where the settlement is around it. In some cases, is possible for a depression or a lake. An obstacle that can be partly surrounded by the settlement is a spur, a road, a riverbed, or a bay. And of course, an obstacle could also limit the settlement totally in one direction, for example as a plateau, an end of a hillside, a riverside, or a coast. When a city is on the back of a mountain, in a valley, on a lynchet, on a river or a sea bank, or on an isthmus, it is limited in 2 directions. A limitation in 3 directions could happen when a city is on a spur, in a valley, on a heathland, in a sinuosity, or in a peninsula. And nevertheless, a limitation in 4 directions could be possible for a city on a hill, in a caldera, or on an island.
So now we're going to talk about the buildings in different climatic zones. Normally, the modern architecture in different climatic zones are very similar, especially for the skyscrapers in the big cities. But when we look back to the vernacular architecture in different climatic zones, we can find some special way of developing their own forms and styles. As you can see in the picture, vernacular architecture varies from climate to climate and from topography to topography. I'm going to talk about two types of vernacular architecture as case studies to give some inspiration to climate and topography adaptive architecture. The first one is ARCAD, which is more related to the condition of climate. The pictures are in Sanxia, Taiwan and Bern, Switzerland, although Taiwan is in subtropical zone and Switzerland is in temperate zone. They both have a kind of building which has an arcade. The difference between them is that this kind of building is everywhere in Taiwan, and in Switzerland, this kind of building is not so common. This kind of arcade building in Southeast Asia developed in the late 18th century. It is really common to see them in South China, Malaysia, Singapore, and Taiwan, where are located in tropical and subtropical zones. This kind of building provides a shelter for people to avoid rain and strong sunlight, which is really important for the daily life in these climatic zones. Not only to prevent people from rain and sunlight, the arcade also makes window shopping for the shops along the street easier. Meanwhile, people often do leisure activities in the arcade not located alongside the big roads but the small streets, which means the arcade is also a place for community and business. This kind of architecture is so important in Taiwan that we even make it into the building laws. The vernacular architecture in desert, arid zone, is quite different compared to others. The case study is related to both climate and topography. The pictures here is from Siwa Oasis in Iran. And the example here is from Maja Adi in Gobi Desert. The weather condition in Gobi Desert made it difficult for people there to construct their built environment. They built the houses along the oasis and river. The order of the houses is not so clear since they have to be adapted into the topography. Because the weather there is extremely warm, ventilation and shady places are the main focuses when building the houses. Normally, there are lots of small windows in the buildings in dry zones, so that they can avoid the heat flow to come into the houses but at the same time to have more lighting inside it. They also use massive walls to reduce the heat flow from exterior to interior, since the low heat conductivity and high energy storage capacity of the sun-dried bricks allow as much as 80% of the outside heat to be absorbed and only 20% transmitted inside. To control the climate in desert, there are lots of ways of doing it, such as a wind tower, solar chimneys, courtyards, domes and air vents, cooling towers, planning roof ponds, and water wells. I'm going to talk about three of them as examples. This picture shows one of the way of climate control in desert. The internal courtyard is much cooler than the environment outside, where is the center of living. It also helps ventilation and filters dust, sand, and noise. The cool air of the summer night is kept for many hours in the courtyard and undisturbed by hot and dusty winds. The rooms of the building also draw daylight and cool air from the courtyard. The left picture shows that in some areas like Turkey, Egypt, and the Middle East, the domed roofs with capped air vents are used. The monitors, funnels, and turbines are the ways of making ventilation, so that the heated interior air can be let to outside. The right picture shows the different types of solar chimney. It is used for reinforcing natural air convection. The chimney has to be black-coated, so that the air inside will be heated during the day. As we all know that hot air rises and cold air drops. After heating, the hot air will rise and the heat flow inside the houses will follow the trace and also get out of the chimney. This is a self-regulating system. The hotter the day, the faster the air motions. Another type of this chimney is glass solar chimney. This kind of chimney is good at venting during the hot afternoon when facing west. So thinking about the similar modern architecture we have today in different climatic and topographic conditions, we should learn the knowledge from vernacular architecture. Understanding the local climate helps us to know the needs of the people in a certain environment. The buildings and the cities should be designed and planned regarding to the local resources and climate conditions, so the resources won't be wasted and be used more efficiently. The materials we use to construct the buildings are also important. For example, in dry zone, the walls should be thicker to avoid the heat. Meanwhile, making a good use of natural ventilation and lighting are also essential when building the houses. A good ventilation and lighting can help reduce the energy we need for turning on air conditioners, heaters, or lamps. If you have further interest in this topic, these literatures are what we recommended you to read. Thanks a lot.